Hello everyone, this is Janice Goldschmidt, and I'm back with another of my tutorials on nutrition and what we eat. Today's topic is vitamin D, and vitamin D has been much in the news of late because there has been some discussion as to whether it can play a protective role in regards to the COVID-19 epidemic. So today, my goal is to introduce you to vitamin D, what it does for the body, what the natural sources are of obtaining vitamin D, and what some of the fortified foods that are also appropriate. I'm going to give you a sense of some good ways to incorporate vitamin D into your diet, and discuss in somewhat briefly what the current thinking is on vitamin D and virus protection. So let's get started. If we look at the biggest facts related to vitamin D, one of the most crucial is that it is a fat-soluble vitamin, meaning that if you get too much, particularly in regards to supplements, it will store in your body. Some vitamins, like vitamin C, is water soluble, and that means if you take too much vitamin C, you'll simply pee it out, so it won't harm you. But vitamin D can build up, which is why you have to be careful about taking it in large amounts as a supplement. Vitamin D is one of the few vitamins that you can get through both exposure from the skin as well as orally through food. It is a very important vitamin for homeostasis of calcium as well as maintaining bone health. So individuals who don't get enough vitamin D are often going to be very vulnerable to a range of problems related to bone strength. Vitamin D facilitates absorption of calcium, and of course we know calcium is related to bone, so it makes perfect sense. But the most important factor of vitamin D today is related to the immune system, and we think that a lack of vitamin D can hamper the immune system, thus making you more vulnerable to illness. So getting appropriate amounts are very important. One of the things that makes vitamin D a bit confusing is that it's actually really a family of vitamins. And the two forms of vitamin D that we most come into contact with are called vitamin D2 and vitamin D3. Vitamin D2 typically comes from a range of plant sources. It comes into our body as an inactive form of D2, and our body can then convert it into the active form we need for all the physical functions. The active form is D3. So D2, when we take it into our body converts it into what we actually need. So it's not as efficient to take D2, but it's more logistically appropriate because it's a cheaper form. It's an easier form to consume than D3. So to sum that up, D3 is the most efficient version for our body, but the most practical version to take in, particularly in regard to supplements and fortified foods, is D2. Either one works just fine in terms of dietary vitamin D. Okay, so you get vitamin D3 by eating fish, a great source of it, or some sort of dairy product, or even eggs. And that is the active form of D, and it is directly promotes your immune system. The other way we make vitamin D3, the active version, is from the sun. It's a complex physiological procedure, but basically what happens is the sunlight hits our skin and it works on cholesterol. Now, we think of cholesterol oftentimes as a negative in our body, but actually it plays many important roles, particularly in the central nervous system, but also in regard to vitamin D. So what happens is cholesterol is worked on by the components of the sun. It's sort of activated, and it breaks down and becomes D3, which is the active version of D in our body, and it works to promote our bones, our teeth, and particularly our immune system. So the sun becomes a very important component, as does dietary intake of D3. All right, what kind of foods are best if you are concerned about your vitamin D? Well, the very best sources are the fatty fishes, mackerel, and things like that. Anything with a lot of oil related to it is going to be a very good vitamin D source. Cod liver oil, your mom used to make you take your cod liver oil when we were little, another generation ago, and that was a great source. Egg yolks are often have very high levels of vitamin D. Some people, the doctor will test you and say you're low in D3, and if they don't think you're able to obtain it naturally, they will put you on supplementations. But the vast majority of people don't really need supplementation because there's enough options to get vitamin C into our diet. Because at the population level, so many people seem to be deficient in vitamin D, we have seen the rise in a number of fortified foods, foods that are given or grown for additional vitamin D. Now, eggs are a natural source of vitamin D, but there are some new eggs. I love these from Eggland's Best that are sort of super saturated with vitamin D. 3 eggs are about 100% of your daily needs, and if I make an omelet, I'm good to go. Orange juice is another great product that now comes fortified with vitamin D. It also comes with calcium fortification. And then another source for a plentiful dose of vitamin D in your diet comes from a range of cereals that now will have additional vitamin D added to it. So those are 3 other options you could use to take in vitamin D through your diet. Okay, so I've told you that vitamin D comes to us through the sun, and so that's a very important source of the active form, D3. To get enough sun to maintain adequate levels of vitamin D, you need about 10 or 30 minutes a day in the sun. And you need that 10 or 30 minutes without sunscreen. So this is, of course, a problematic thing because we keep promoting the idea of sunscreen. We want to avoid skin cancer, but we also want to get our vitamin D. And so the answer is not simply to go out and sit in the sun for 30 minutes. The answer is to have lots of little sun experiences so that we don't get that excessive sun and cause the damage, the skin damage that then can result and melanomas and things, but that we get that intake of sun so we can promote the production of vitamin D3. A great example is, when the sun is shining and you want to do it, in that part of the day when the sun is at its peaks, so between 10:30 and 2:30, 3 o'clock in the day, in the afternoon. So you walk out to the mailbox to get the mail and you take it very, very slowly. And you collect the mail slowly, and you get your 5 minutes of sun. Or you walk to the car and get something out of the car, but you turn it into a mini walk. So you get lots of little breaks of sun throughout the day that will increase your mood, but it will also help you safely get enough sun in. Many of the houses at CSS have balconies. So those are ideal ways to slip outside a couple of times a day and get that dose of sun, shall we say. So sun is a very important component, and I know it seems conflicting because for years we encourage people to protect themselves against the sun, but the consequence of that, of course, is that we're seeing falling rates of vitamin D. So we're swinging back the other way now. At the same time, most people can get dietary vitamin D in adequate amounts. There's enough products now that you can very easily obtain 100% if you want to go that route. So what happens if you don't get enough vitamin D into your diet? Well, we know that some populations don't get enough, and there's a number of reasons for that. Individuals with darker skin, and that makes sense, right? If you have darker skin, the sun is going to activate less of that vitamin D. So they have a greater need for dietary intake or even more sun than those of us who are very fair-skinned. Some individuals with gastrointestinal issues like inflammatory bowel disease, they'll often need more vitamin D. And older individuals, particularly those who live in very northern climes where there's less sun, they're less likely to get that natural dose of sunshine as they like to see. Those are individuals who might be at greater risk and might have a need for actually supplementation. Most of us can get enough sun and enough active vitamin D or D2 or D3 into our bodies to be adequate. When we don't get enough, we're going to see a lot of issues related to our bones and teeth. Our bones are not going to have enough, be able to maintain their strength. We see a lot of both osteopenia and osteoporosis, meaning a weakness in muscle where a degradation of muscle capacity and a degradation of bones. And of course, osteoporosis is where your bones become so brittle they start to break. And that's a very concerning situation because you can't reverse that. Okay, once osteoporosis begins, it goes forward, and then you become very fragile. Vitamin D is also related to mood and energy levels. So you might be depressed and you might be very lethargic without your vitamin D. And one of the biggest things that we know about vitamin D is that it's a big factor in our immune system. So if our vitamin D is deficient, that leaves us more vulnerable to get ill, which of course leads straight into COVID-19. All right, I told you in the beginning of this presentation that vitamin D is fat soluble. And that means when we get excess in our body, beyond what our body needs, it just stores in the fat. And so that if you take in too much, that's going to lead to problems. You go out and you buy a bottle of D2, which is typically what is available, not D3. You buy a bottle of D2 and you think to yourself, I know that vitamin D helps individuals who have COVID-19, and therefore I'm going to take some. But I know I should only take the recommended daily amount, but surely more is better. So you start slugging it back. Your body only needs so much, and it's going to start storing in your fat cells, and you're going to start to have problems. And we call that toxicity. You're taking so much that you're now turning the vitamin D in your body into a poison, basically. And it can lead to loss of appetite. It can lead to weight loss. It can contribute to irregular heartbeat and a hardening of the tissues in some cases. So the key is to follow the recommended amount. But what I really urge you to do is not to take supplements, but to get all of your vitamin D from natural sources. The magic power of food, I like to call it. You can't overdose on vitamin D in food. It simply is impossible. And if you eat a balanced diet that includes either some natural forms of vitamin D or foods that are supplemented with vitamin D, you will take in the perfect amount and your body will, balance perfectly. So try and avoid supplements completely. Get some sunshine. Take some foods that are supplemented, fortified with vitamin D. Take some foods that are natural sources of vitamin D, and you will do just fine. Okay, so we're sliding into home here, and I do want to talk about COVID-19 and vitamin D because there have been some studies showing that individuals who are the most sick and the most risk for acute respiratory failures with COVID-19 also have low vitamin D. But the key here is that we know so little about COVID-19 right now. This is just all very introductory, fragmentary information. And you've got to remember there's a difference between correlation and causation. The classic example is people who die of lung cancer have a lot of ashtrays, right? And we can show that statistically. They own a lot more ashtrays than the typical person. But we don't think that ashtrays cause lung cancer. We just know they're associated with cancer. And it could be that the kind of person who would be vulnerable to COVID-19 would be more likely to be low in vitamin D. We don't necessarily know if there's a direct relationship, but they certainly are probably indicators of the same thing. A low vitamin D can indicate someone who is health-wise quite vulnerable. Time will tell, and we need a lot more studies on who are the most susceptible to getting COVID-19 with the most complications. And there I am. I am here to serve you, and I would be happy to answer any comments or questions or suggestions that you have. Likewise, if you have a topic that you'd like me to address in one of these videos, please let me know. And I will see you in the next video.